Where there is ruin, there is hope for treasure.
Hello. Welcome back from the honeymoon, from all your honeymoons. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Brandstetter, founder and podcast producer at Max Podcasting, and you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com. And as I alluded to, 20 seconds ago, this is the first episode back from the honeymoon and absolute time of our lives in Italy. We are pizzaed up, pasta'd up, gelatoed up, and today we are saffroned up. This is episode 243, and today's guest is Keith Alaniz. Keith is the co-founder and CEO of Rumi Spice, which partners with Afghan farmers to bring the highest quality, sustainably farmed saffron, cumin, all sorts of amazing spices from Afghanistan all around the world. In this episode, we talk what Keith learned in his crazy experiences serving in the military in both Iraq and Afghanistan, how he created connections and created a business partnering with those Afghan farmers, and the challenges and beautiful challenges and problem solving that comes with running a business where your product is sourced from halfway around the world. It is Keith, and it is spicy. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Keith Alaniz, co-founder of Rumi Spice. Super cool, and I dare say spicy company with a really strong mission behind it. Keith, so much looking forward to our conversation today. Thank you so much for joining. How you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me, Max. Excited to be here.
Of course, and if you can make it through the first spice pun, then you can make it through the rest, so thank you. But really excited to dive into the Rumi Spice journey. But before that, before even starting the business, served for the army in Afghanistan, and I was looking at your background, some of the stuff that you did, and I saw you were a platoon leader for a platoon who was in charge of neutralizing improvised explosive devices, IEDs, which sounds like the most stressful job in the world. I mean, how can you take us back to that phase of life and what the day-to-day was like there?
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, it's the most stressful job short of being a startup entrepreneur. But commission. So I joined the army in '99. I was really young, 17, out of high school, kind of looking for something to do in the summer. Convinced my mom to sign the papers and let me join. And this was pre 9/11, which seems like a long time ago now. And then went to school. 9/11 happened while I was in school at Texas A&M and ROTC, and by the time I graduated, we were well into two conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq. So right after commissioning, and training, took over as platoon leader for a platoon that was already deployed in Baghdad, Iraq, and this was a really tough time for Iraq war. It was probably the worst point, in the war in terms of the IEDs were. I mean, we were in a sector where we were fighting basically. There was two factions that were fighting each other, and then they were both fighting us. So it was, nothing short of chaos. And our role was to, go out the gate every day and spend 12 hours cruising down the streets at, 10 miles an hour looking for roadside bombs. And it was really, at that time, it was basically us and our eyeballs trying to find what looked odd and out of place. And we were very fortunate to come out, relatively unscathed. But yeah, we found a lot of bombs, and then some of them found us before we found them. So it was a crazy experience. But I'll tell you what, it really did shape my sort of view of life in the military, and it gave me an immediate perspective on the serious consequences of conflict. And I think that throughout my decade in the military, and then leading up into my experience in Afghanistan, it gave me an appreciation for addressing the sources of instability and conflict before it requires, young men and women to go out and, fight because obviously at that point it's too late. I compare my experience in Iraq to Afghanistan, where Afghanistan I was there in a little bit different capacity with some language skills and some training in, the Afghanistan culture and some of the socioeconomic conditions of Afghanistan, particularly the language skills, So I compare my time in Iraq, it was like operating with a blindfold compared to as much as I could see and experience in Afghanistan with just a little bit of language skills and knowledge of the culture. I mean, my eyes were just wide open to, what was happening in and around, which was a totally different experience than being in a place where I didn't know the language and I didn't know the culture, and I was just there trying to essentially react to bombs, So it was, it gave me a ability to have a different perspective on what was happening in Afghanistan and how we could affect things there.
I mean, you talk about once in a lifetime experiences, but though I can't even imagine what you went through and just kind of what was on your mind every day. It's such a fascinating and roller coaster of a time. You mentioned that you basically were looking at roadside bombs with your eyeballs, which is quite the thing to add to your resume, I would say. But how did you approach each day knowing that there's so much danger and there's so much on the line, every time you step out on that road?
That's a good question, Max. Honestly, I mean, I don't know if there's another way to sugarcoat it, but it's a complete disassociation and focus on what you have to do that day and what that mission is. For better or worse, that's how I dealt with it, and I think that's how a lot of people dealt with it. You're hyper focused on the next 12 hours. I mean, the next 12 feet in front of you. You put everything else out of your mind. I think that the time to daydream and wander about like getting back home and all that kind of stuff, that is like nothing's in front of your mind except for the task at hand. And it's an intensity that is at one time exhilarating and at the same time exhausting because you do that for, we were there for 15 months, and it was mentally straining to say the least, but at the end of the day, an experience that, shaped me, because I think that level of intensity is something that you never sort of experience again in your life, and kind of knowing like where your body and mind can go when you do have like something of critical importance in front of you is you kind of test your limits, and I think that in this case it was like less physical but more mental, but yeah, certainly pushing your body to its limits.
So let's get to what you first said, maybe tongue-in-cheek, maybe not, is even more stressful, which is being a startup founder, is being an entrepreneur. So let's get to the Rumi spice story. And I've heard of Saffron. I don't know when I heard of it. I mean, a while ago at this point, but I'm still not that familiar with it. But what I know, it's a huge part of the business and a super cool spice. When did you first cross paths with this thing called Saffron?
Yeah, Max, I was just like you. I didn't really know much about saffron. I had heard of it as a spice. I was in Afghanistan. This is around 2014, and I was working with the local government and local tribal elders. And in this capacity, I was approached by a farmer named Haji Yosef, and he brought with him the saffron, and he said, look, I'd grow more of the saffron if I could find a market for my products. And he was talking about hyper local, like his local village market. So he was looking for whatever assistance I could give him. I had been developing this perspective on Afghanistan and realizing that most of the causes of instability are economically driven. And, it was easy to see that, at that point, 14 years, ultimately like 21 years of international involvement was really focused on the urban centers, but 85% of the populace lives in the rural areas. So they were not really seeing any kind of tangible benefits from the international involvement in Afghanistan. And what this farmer was telling me was some microcosm of a larger problem. There's a tremendous capacity for production for doing, great products, but a lack of a market to like really draw out that, create that demand that would warrant increasing the supply of product. I took this little spice, did some research, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's the most expensive spice in the world, and it's expensive because of the amount of labor it takes to harvest and process this product. So I talked to my friend Kim, so we had both served together in the military. She was at Harvard Business School at the time, and I said, hey Kim, this is an interesting idea. What if we can open up some markets to these Afghan farmers? We could create a little business for them. and start incentivizing them to grow more saffron. And at that time, we thought like, well, maybe we can get like a handful of farmers, connect them with a handful of chefs and restaurants in the U.S. and kind of be done with it. And that was really where it started. But as we started taking this saffron around to chefs, we really realized that this was something special because of the particular terroir of Afghanistan, the way that they cultivated it. It was very high quality and like nothing that the chefs, had seen before. So we really caught on with high-end chefs as our early adopters and sort of realized we had something special on our hand with the saffron coming from Afghanistan.
What does saffron taste like? Like I imagine I've had it and didn't even realize that I've had it before. But what does it taste like? And I guess a part B of that, just to throw a curveball at you, is what are some of the most common foods that typically are spiced with saffron?
So I'll start with the second question. Most people would have probably experienced saffron in paella. So if you've had a decent paella, it should have saffron in it. I struggle to describe flavors, and saffron is one of those flavors that's a little bit harder to describe, but it's a floral sort of earthy essence that it imparts to the food that it's in, but it very much changes from whether you're putting it into a savory dish like paella or a sweet dish like there's a ice cream called Bastani ice cream that you can make with saffron, but you can run the gamut of savory to sweet and how it can be applied. It also imparts like a yellow or red coloring to food, so it is sometimes used as just a natural like food coloring. And then there's all of these other health benefits that come along with saffron. In a lot of places, in the Middle East and other parts of the world, they use it for its medicinal purposes as well. And a lot of the history of saffron, from Cleopatra to Alexander the Great, it's built around this idea of saffron as the health benefits of saffron as an aphrodisiac, and there's all these great stories about saffron, and it has a tremendous history. I think the floral earthy flavor is probably the best way to describe the taste of saffron. But it's one of those, there's nothing even similar to it that you can put in a dish. If a dish calls for saffron, there's not a substitute. Although some people use turmeric because it does provide that coloring agent, but it doesn't have the taste that saffron does.
Yeah, and it makes you think of, turmeric's a great example of, I think of like turmeric and cumin and garam masala. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it that, but like there's certain spices that are so unique and like you only know it when you've tasted it and then you're like, oh, that's it. Or that it sounds like saffron's so versatile. The reputation for saffron precedes itself, but it's a really awesome spice to like be the, front and center first thing, flagship spice of your brand. So I see why you gravitated towards it. How about creating those relationships with the Afghan farmers as well as setting up, the market in the U.S.? What were those early steps in terms of turning this from a theoretical idea to an actual business?
Yeah, so when we first started, my partner Kim, between a first and second year of business school, flew to Afghanistan, as a civilian. I was there in Afghanistan with the military, but fortunately had a pretty long leash given the job that I had, so I was able to meet some of these farmers. She went and met some more farmers and literally carried back saffron in a plastic bag to the U.S. and started knocking on doors and trying to find a market for these products. And like I said, we found that the early adopters were high-end chefs that really appreciated the quality, and it started sort of gaining some traction with these chefs, and we started developing a relationship with some of our suppliers that we still have today and exporting more and more saffron. As we grew, we realized that, in order to scale, we needed to drive some efficiencies in the way that saffron was produced, because the traditional way of production was the farmers would harvest the flowers that comes from a crocus flower, and then the women in the farmer's family would get around in the farmhouse and extract the stigma from the crocus flower, dry it on mats, consolidate it, and then sell it in the market. Well, you can imagine, it's one thing when you're doing that with 10 farmers, but when you have the demand and you add more and more farmers, if you're talking about 100 different farmers with 100 different houses and all doing things a little bit differently, it's very hard to maintain quality control over that scope of production. So one of our innovations in that saffron industry is that we saw this operation problem and consolidated production in single facilities. It was very interesting because culturally in Afghanistan, women are the ones involved in the processing. So we needed to hire women to do the processing of the crocus flowers in a centralized facility. And we needed to do it in a way that it complied with the local norms of women in the workplace. So our partner went out and had to convince the heads of household that this is a safe place for them to work. And we really made a conscious decision to be Afghan led and within the Afghan societal norms. We weren't trying to go there and change the way, people culturally, felt comfortable operating, waving an American flag and imparting our way of life on people. We just wanted them to have an opportunity to have an economic benefit from the market that we were creating. That became like pretty core to our mission is that now, what started as an solution to an operations problem actually became a driver of impact, which is really what kind of drives our business now is that we hire thousands of women in Afghanistan each year. And this is one of the few, I can't think of another one off the top of my head, industries where we've created this sort of ability for women to work, earn a wage, and take that, money home to support their families. It really changes the way that they're viewed in their communities. And it opens up opportunities. They're not just labor, they're also our managers, they're our financial people. Like they do all the roles within this company. And a lot of them are farmers as well. So it's really shown, the society that, women can provide tremendous value in a working capacity beyond what their contribution is already to the household economy. They can go out and earn a living. I think that one thing I'm particularly proud of, 20 years of involvement in Afghanistan, of international community involvement, all went up in smoke a year and a half ago, or, when the Taliban took over. Everything went up in smoke, except for what we were doing here, because what we did was created things with the local culture in mind. And I mean, honestly, we've been able to continue unabated, and our production continues, and women are continuing to be paid. Even while the Taliban shut down women from other public spaces in Afghanistan, the people who work with Rumi Spice in Afghanistan are still able to go to work every day and earn a living and support their families.
Yeah, you got a lot to be proud about. It's amazing on so many accounts, and I'm glad you didn't, go to door waving American flag in his face, and imparting value.
I mean, it's funny you laugh at it, but that's not too different. That's probably an apt description of a lot of our involvement there over 20 years.
To put the production in perspective, so how long does it typically take, like, to go from a living crocus flower out on a farm to an actual stigma saffron that is able to be consumed?
Well, we harvest in late October or in October timeframe, let's say, and that saffron from the harvest can make it here to the U.S. and be in a restaurant by December or January. So we can move it pretty quickly the way we've set up our processing. But a fun fact is that it takes 150,000 crocus flowers to produce just 1 kilogram of saffron. So that gives you kind of a sense for the amount of labor that's involved in each one of those crocus flowers. Those stigmas have to be hand extracted, dried, and then packaged up for sale. It's very laborious.
Yeah, that 150,000 to one. And the flowers are very pretty as well. Like, it's a very pretty spice. It's a very, like, it makes sense that, I mean, obviously, the labor is what drives it up, but it makes sense. Shout out my friend Spence. It makes sense that is the most expensive spice in the world.
Yeah, and it's immune to automation, so it's not something that you could. I mean, people have been thinking about automating saffron for years, but it just, it's at this point it's too delicate of a task to sort of run it through a machine.
Yeah, you spoke about the impact that you have and the amazing women that are part of the Rumi spice journey and putting these spices together. How have you created, I don't know if you want to call it a program or a culture where it's encouraging this and you're able to continue to give back and create opportunities like this?
It starts with our customers. I think that our customers, they value the quality of the product, but they also value the impact that they're having. And I feel that the American consumer is more conscious with how they spend money and want to do things that, have their monies go into good use. And that really helps us, from a demand side. And we're, sold in Whole Foods across the country and, 4,000 other places. And we continue to see our market grow. And it's because of that we can continue to grow the demand in Afghanistan. I'll also say that I think that food itself, is important in sort of bridging cultures. I mean, here in the US, like, you don't really think about it, but every time you go out to eat, you're experiencing a different culture. So you make a choice every night to go eat something with your family and showcase a different culture. Well, what we're trying to do is really bring that culture, connect that culture of Afghanistan to the U.S. and really tell people that, Afghanistan's not just the terrible stuff you hear on the news. It's not just war and terrorism and opium, but it's the story about resilience. It's a story about, women working and people trying, despite 40 years of warfare, people working to, provide a better life for their families. And it's this beautiful culture. It's this beautiful food, and it's this, amazing, environment that people don't always, you know, you can't just fly to Afghanistan experience, but you can have saffron and you can have cumin and you can have all these ingredients from Afghanistan and at least, know that you're connected to people in that sort of way.
It's an incredible mission. And you mentioned the flight, and that's something I was really wondering about. Is I think over time and as technology has progressed, it's become more and more feasible to quote unquote, run a business remotely. But not often do you have somebody who's running a business where, the main product is sourced, literally such a long flight away. And I'm sure you travel around quite a bit, but the time of this recording, you recently moved to San Antonio. You were in Chicago before that. Both not exactly a, 1 hour flight or boat ride to Afghanistan. How do you maintain, the business running efficiently and production and everything in that ballpark while being so far away from the actual, crocus flowers in the beginning?
Yeah, we have a globally dispersed team, so I've gotten really good at looking at my world time to just make sure that I know where everybody is. But I feel like we're working 24/7 because of the way our team's built out. But I have actually traveled. I haven't traveled since COVID, but I've been to Afghanistan. I look forward to going back there. We were trying to go at one point. We were going every year to just have a presence there and to see what was happening and we rely on our partners and we've established really good relationships with them over the years and most people will just call suppliers, but these are truly partners. So we have a mutually beneficial relationship and we've established protocols and quality control and things like that. And that's one of the things I think helped us to unlock the potential of Afghanistan is that we were able to take this like sort of modern way of food safety and teach that to our suppliers. And over the years we invested a lot of time and money and resources into establishing quality control procedures, and that's really what's unlocked the ability for us to export agricultural products at scale, is because we can do it in a way that's going to frankly just meet our pretty stringent requirements on food safety. But yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of become second nature to work globally, and we've been working remote before the whole world worked remote in 2019. That's just how we've always grown this business. So.
You're a true trendsetter, a spicy trendsetter.
Yeah.
Speaking of that quality, your business has grown a crazy number in terms of how many different spices you offer, and I know you got merchandise now as well. There's so many different products you offer in addition to like the original saffron. How have you been able to maintain that Rumi spice brand while adding more and more different flavors and spices to the mix?
We really center on the quality and the story. So I mean, at number one, it has to be a high quality product. So we're not just trying to get any run of the mill product. What's great is that because of the way that agriculture is done in Afghanistan, we tend to get high quality products. It's I think in the Western world we're probably used to consuming products that are like I said commercially produced, but there is this trend towards local small farmers, and people realize that you can get better quality often from smaller farmers than you can if you're buying large industrial production. Afghanistan, that's all there is small farmers, so all of the products tend to be pretty high quality. I think what's really interesting about our products, other than saffron, are that they are all wild foraged. So the saffron is farmed, but the cumin, the fennel, the dill seed, all those other products that we're bringing out, they're found growing wild in regions in Afghanistan. And so the villagers go out and forage these products. When it's harvest time, they'll go out to the mountains and like harvest this cumin. So that I mean, not only is it a cool story, but the quality is so much differentiated from like your run of the mill spices that are domestic production. It's just a totally different experience.
If quality is important, not only in your spices, but in your business and your podcast as well, Consider signing up for the Podcasting to the Max newsletter. You can do so at maxpodcasting.com/newsletter. It is your place to learn how to create a high-quality podcast, improve the quality of your own podcast, as well as improve the quality of your entrepreneurship mint. Just made that up. But it is the mix of podcasting and entrepreneurship, and it is a new email from me every Thursday to your inbox, except when I was on our honeymoon, because, honeymoon. maxpodcasting.com/newsletter. Now let's, do that thing where we switch gears and dive into the mind of Keith. So let's switch gears a bit. Let's get to inspiration and creativity. So this is more you personally as an entrepreneur, business owner, how you stay inspired, how you stay creative. And you just segued perfectly because you talked about people in Afghanistan being able to, quote unquote, wild forage, grab these spices that they're out in the wild. I'm curious on your standpoint, outside of work, what do you do in your free time to help you stay creative or, blow off steam, take your mind off things? What keeps you flowing there?
That's a tough question to ask someone who's an entrepreneur and with kids. So I think on my free time, I spend time with my kids, and they're actually pretty inspirational. And I think just last night I was making on my personal Instagram, I was making a post and I was listening to what they were saying and doing, and they kind of inspired me to make a little post about Rumi, just by the game that they were playing. Yeah, I'll be honest, I lean on my team who has, got a great marketing director who gets all the creative juices going for the company. One thing I'll say though, I think it is tough to work on the left side and right side of your brain because, especially folks running small businesses are trying to do a lot, and, it's hard to just kind of turn that on and off. I think it's a special talent, people who can be creative and then be analytical at the same time, or in the same day. So yeah, I definitely look towards my teammates and just try to stay connected with other folks in and around business and in food, and then kind of get creativity and inspired from, chefs and from, other folks in the food business and what they're doing.
In addition to your kids who provide endless inspiration and sure entertainment as well, and social media content for you. But how about in the food space? Are there any well-known chefs or food brands that you kind of admire and learn from?
Oh yeah, definitely. Not to name drop, but where Thomas Keller is, uses our saffron, and everything that him and his restaurants do is really inspiring. As a personal, me cooking, probably a little bit outside of my skill level for the most part, but it is really cool to see the stuff that he's coming up with, and likewise other chefs. Something more my style is we have a lot of chefs that make paella, Spanish chefs and paella restaurants, Cafe Barbariba in Chicago, Danny Yeto in DC, and they're doing all kinds of incredible paellas. So I like to see what they're doing, and then I kind of try to do my own at home. So I do like making paella. It's actually not as hard as it looks. And then I think from a brand perspective, what I've come to realize is that we do have a high quality product that almost speaks for itself. It's hard to tell people what food tastes like through a picture, but what we can tell people is the story. So we have been trying to lean more and more on the story, because I think people appreciate knowing that this is not just sort of a faceless brand, but this brand represents people, and these are the people that it represents, and this is the struggles that they go to, this is their accomplishments, and this is sort of our journey. And I think sharing that and being really upfront with our journey as a company and the mission and what we stand for, I think is really important to drive that connection with our customers.
Oh, totally. It adds so much meaning to the brand, but also personality, and it's an incredible differentiator for the brand. The spice category is so crazy crowded, and there are so many companies they're trying to stand out there. Having a strong inspirational story behind it is only for the better. You alluded to your cooking ability, so now that you know how to make paella as well, but overall, how has your cooking skill been impacted by you getting into the spice/food business?
Oh yeah, before this I was a meat and potatoes kind of guy. I would if I could grill things, I would make it, but I wasn't much of much of a cook per se, but now I won't say I'm an expert, and I still think that my wife is a better cook than I am. But I do like to play around in the kitchen a lot more, and I'm always trying to try new things. One of my favorite aspects of the job is going and talking to chefs and selling into restaurants because it's just such a cool atmosphere. And actually, it reminds me a lot of the military, the way that the kitchens run. Yeah, I really enjoy just kind of getting in there with the chefs and like seeing what's going on behind the kitchen and talking about how they want to build their menu and what we can add to their menu in terms of ingredients. Yeah, maybe I'm able to kind of glean some ideas off of off of just being around these really creative and really skilled chefs.
It's like that show, The Bear. Yes, chef. Yes, chef.
That's exactly yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, that's exactly what it's like.
Speaking of unusual shows, let's get to the unusual pet peeves, quirks, weird talents. Now, this doesn't have to tie back to Rumi at all. It's more about you personally, but you're welcome to try to tie it back if you want. Pet peeve. What's your biggest pet peeve?
I wouldn't so much call it a pet peeve, but I think that I'm a pretty like detailed and analytical person, so that's not everybody's style, and it's not everybody's right style, at the time. But I think that I appreciate when people. I appreciate the like a detailed analysis of things, and so sometimes I have to like you know understand my own sort of propensity to like overanalyze, and then be able to meet people halfway on a good solution that may not be perfect.
How about quirks? What's something a little quirky about your personality that your wife, kids,
I should bring her in
team,
to
somebody
answer this.
somebody calls you out for it? Yeah, I mean, she's welcome to. But
Well, I should have used that previous answer for this answer, but I think my wife would say that I'm like you know lack common sense, or I mean I would say that maybe
wait, this sounds like my wife and me.
yeah. I think that like I'm a guy who's gonna never remember where I parked, so I'm just gonna walk away from my car without a second thought, and then just hope that I wander back to it, when I'm done, wherever I am, and that's kind of a typical like I'm like I'll actually be thinking about something in my head and then like not even
Right.
be aware of what's happening.
Right. Always thinking. Yeah. Multitasking is very intriguing, and always be thinking of something else. But yeah, that's how you lose your car, I guess.
Yeah.
No.
But you'll find it eventually, just
Yeah, exactly.
walk the garage. More time to think while you're looking for your car.
How about weird talents? And I won't let you say being detailed and analytical for this one. This is something that like could be I guess not based on your last answer, but it could be a memory trick. It could be, musical instrument, something like that. Just something you're really good at that you would do at like a party or a talent show.
Well, I don't know about a talent show, but I do play musical instruments. I play guitar and piano, and haven't performed in a very long time. But yeah, that's my talent, I guess.
Perfect. Well, let's wrap up with some sweet tunes called Rapid Fire Q&A. You ready for it?
Let's do it.
All right, let's get wild. I'm not going to make you sing. That was a joke. I just like the music reference there. This could be guitar or piano. What's your favorite song to cover on one of those instruments?
Gosh, you catch me. I mean, it kind of ebbs and flows, right? Like, but lately, anything that's like Disney or like Jim Henson songs, are a big hit around the house. And I also like, country, like particularly Texas country music. What's a good one? Dixieland Delight by Alabama, one of my favorite songs to play.
Could you sing it? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. All right. Speaking of Texas, you moved from Chicago to San Antonio. Besides the obvious, the weather, what has been the biggest change in being back in Texas?
I think being around family and a place where you have roots is a big change for me. I mean, my family's been in San Antonio for many generations, and so it's nice to be able to go around and have connections, places, and honestly, I can't really go anywhere in San Antonio, even though it's the seventh largest city in the country, without running into someone that I probably know or that knows me, or so it's got that small town feel, which I really appreciate.
I've been to San Antonio once. We went as a family exploring some Texas cities, and I'm sure you don't go because it's probably like going to Times Square. It's so over touristy, but the San Antonio Riverwalk I think is so cool. It's like such a cool, unique part of the town, and I just remember we were down there. It feels like a city below the city. It's like got a whole separate feel to it. It's a very unique feature.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure how recently you came, but I mean, it's expanded so much, and so I mean, it used to. I would say like maybe 5, 10 years ago it was very touristy, but now it's everybody goes there because they've expanded it, and there's all these new kind of more local like places that people go and hang out, and just that whole area of town has really changed a lot. A lot of exciting things happening here.
Another Texas question for you, keeping you on your toes here. You are an Aggie, went to Texas A&M, so gig 'em. There you go. But what is your favorite tradition from A&M?
I think my favorite one is Aggie Bonfire, which you may remember in '99 there was this big tragedy where the bonfire fell, but then it still kind of continues in a form off of campus, and I was working on bonfire. It was an experience as a young person where you get to like work really hard, blood, sweat, and tears with people that you don't know when you start, and then you kind of become really good friends, and a really good bonding experience, and just a good taste of like teamwork and hard work. And yeah, there's a thing called bonfire weather. So when the weather drops, like you get that reminiscing of what it's like to be out there in the cold, chopping down trees and working hard with your fellow Aggies. So that's got to be my favorite one.
Yeah, I think A&M has got to be one of the schools with the most tradition. I know there's so many traditions there, and ties to school spirit. I know there's all the football traditions as well. What is your favorite recipe? I know on your site you offer recipes. What is your favorite recipe using your spices besides paella?
Besides paella, there's one that's a saffron flan that I'm a big fan of making. So I do like flan, and actually it looks really great when you make it, and it's not terribly challenging to make. So yeah, I think that's my favorite one outside of paella. Risotto, I like risotto too, but that's also pretty, I think, common. Maybe for me, I have a lot of saffron.
Saffron flan sounds like it's one of those words. It's like they say the term cellar door is so easy on the ears to hear. I think saffron flan is as well. It just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, that's great.
And then last one, besides saffron, what would you say is the most underrated spice?
Oh, easily the cumin. I think that once you start using it, you can't go back to regular cumin. It's so differentiated in my mind, even more so than saffron. Whereas you can get like a lower quality saffron and add a whole bunch of it, and you could probably elevate that flavor to the same as like the high quality saffron that we're bringing. With cumin, it's a different profile, so it's like you can't just add a bunch of low quality cumin and get this taste and flavor of this wild forage black cumin, because it's actually an entirely different sort of species of plant that it's coming from. So that's one of my favorite. Although the za'atar spice is like super popular now, so I think that one's really growing in popularity. And yeah, I mean I like it too, but yeah, I gotta figure out like what everybody's using the za'atar for, because it's flying off the shelf. So.
Yeah, I'm a huge cumin fan, so definitely have to try yours. And za'atar, I don't think it's probably like saffron. I'm sure I've had it, but didn't know it. But those are very cool. I think cumin. At some point along the way, I realized like, oh, that smell, that taste, like that's cumin, and I just love eating like meals with meat in it. So it
Yeah,
makes sense that it's heavy in there. But Keith, this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much. Just absolute blast. Love what you're doing and
thanks,
all you've
Max.
created. And of course, my pleasure. And all for all things Rumi. Where is the best place for people to try out Rumi Spice, any Rumi Spice, as well as if they want to connect with you online?
Yeah, you can find us at rumispice.com, RUMISPICE, or go to any of your neighborhood Whole Foods stores, and you'll see our products in the spice aisle.
Perfect. Last thing, it could be a quote, a line, whatever you want to end on. Final thoughts. Stage is yours. You can sing us off if you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just gonna keep teasing you on that. No, a quote to send us off here. Take us home.
If I had to think of something off the top of my head, well, one thing I'll say is that we named the company Rumi because he's a poet that spent a lot of time in Afghanistan, and he has a great philosophy. So we're trying, we want people to associate Afghanistan with these things like like Rumi that just brought this beautiful philosophy to the world. Still today, the world's best-selling poet. And one thing that I think maybe top of mind for me now is a Rumi quote that says, where there is ruin, there is hope for treasure. So I think that the perception of a lot of the world and of what Afghanistan is this place of war and ruin, but what we're bringing out is really treasure. So that's my quote. I'll leave you with.
A great quote from the quotable Keith. Thank you so much, Keith, for coming on the podcast, sharing your wild story, those wild spices, everything wild. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the podcast. And then go try out some spices with them. Even if you've never had it before or knowingly know what said spice tastes like before. You can also find us on Good Pods, where there are really, really good podcasts and podcast recommendations from podcast people and beyond. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at maxpodcasting.com and sign up for the Podcasting to the Max newsletter. That's at maxpodcasting.com/newsletter. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!